Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
Hello.
Good evening.
We are doing. Okay. You've opened it to, yeah, I was actually the public.
Yeah.
So it is 6 o'clock on Monday, March 6th. We will open the select board meeting. Present on Zoom are select board members Andy Potter, Andy Kraus, myself, Kathleen Kersey, and town administrator Marie Ryan. First on the agenda, and I will make a motion to approve the minutes from February 21st. Second.
Aye.
A roll call vote. Andy Potter.
Abstain.
Okay. Andy Kraus.
Aye.
And I'm an aye. We have
Dana. Oh, yeah, I was gonna say Dana's not on yet, but
I don't see
Bob's
her.
there.
Bob's here. And Bob, you are our only citizen for Citizen Speak Time. Do you have anything you'd like to say?
No hand. Oh, yep, there he goes.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's just brief. Marie, I want to get in the minutes that in 2010, when the town was rebuilding or working with the state to rebuild the bridge by the Shaker Mill, Kurt uncovered one of the original millstones from the Shaker Mill. The stone is a pretty neat artifact. It's historic. We actually put it on display during the Zucchini Festival. And then it's now residing in Vern Towers' shop to be finished restoration. Vern did a lot of research on it. And hopefully we'll have it on display at the 250th. But I want it noted in the minutes that the town owns this. This is a town piece of property. So if something happens to Vern, somebody doesn't come and take it, we have it on record that we have title to it. Okay.
Bob, should we do something more official than that? Some other written paperwork?
I'm not sure. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't quite know what to do. It's a piece of real property, obviously. I don't know if I'm open to any other suggestions, but I certainly want it on note.
So Vern's doing something with the stone right now?
Yeah.
Or in general?
He's got it protected, but it's actually 12 stones in a circle that are joined with a metal band. And the metal band, of course, is all rusted and rotted and stuff like that. So we've got to put a new metal band on it and figure out a way of mounting it, and then put a decent explanation. The stone came from a quarry in France. It's the only quarry that manufactures this kind of limestone. So it's really cool.
So I wonder, is it something that the Historical Society would want and would be able to display? How big is this?
Probably about 3 feet in diameter. And we're thinking of actually displaying it next to the Shaker Mill where it belongs and where it was found, which is town property. And putting it secure so obviously somebody doesn't run off with a piece of it. So, but we haven't designed that yet.
Gotcha. All right. Well, maybe we could just shoot a note to town council during this next couple of weeks and find maybe a more official way to make note of the ownership.
Yeah, I mean, Vern recognizes it's not like he's hiding it or anything like that. Nobody wants
Right.
it, but you never know. You never know.
All right, Andy or
Okay.
Andy, any thoughts?
No, it's in summary, it sounds like a town owns it and it should be displayed on a piece of town property. So then therefore, I guess officially, and you can concur with the lawyer, that it's officially the town's and they hold ownership to it. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I just don't know how, there's no license plate or VIN number, so not quite sure how you register a piece of stone or pieces of stone, but in any case. All right. That's all my citizen speak.
Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Hi, Dana.
Good evening. Hello.
So Dana's here to give us an update on the planning board and the master plan committee.
So let's see. There are zoning changes we've been working on. Short-term rent, accessory dwelling unit, and floodplain overlay district updates. We had a lot of very focused activity in last March, maybe April to May. We arrived at drafts, which I believed have been circulated. They haven't. We can circulate them again. We arrived at drafts with, I should say, for the ADU and the short-term rental, where we had identified certain questions that were outstanding. We did get, what's the right word, sidetracked or overloaded with work. Choice with Wisdom Lodge and then the Wiseacre Farm special permit and then the Foundry special permit. So we just now have circled back to getting back to this work. Short-term rentals is a current topic of concern, needs to be worked on. There was a vision committee meeting that was initiated by Joe Roy with the invitation to an attorney that he knows, Alex Glover, who is from Alford and has worked on that in Alford. And, there's a general principle of putting the use as a category in the zoning which is allowed. There's principles of, and this is where there has been discussion of allowing a limited number of days for a short-term rental to be done as of right without a special permit. And then the corollary principle of that would be to a larger number of days to be allowed by special permit. I have made the observation to people at different times in this process that you can draw the analogy a little bit. It's like possibly like a home occupation. We have, I think it's 5 different categories of home occupation in our zoning. The one category that is as of right has no employees, no traffic, no evidence of the activity. You're just doing something within your house and you're not disturbing anybody. And you step it up then and you can get a category where you need a special permit for a home occupation because employees, or you might have more traffic and so forth. And so the principle might be the substance of the discussion on the planning board last Thursday was that perhaps up to a max, first off, I'll do my best to give a synopsis of all this so you guys get in the loop a little more and we can get your feedback, in fact, is what we need. We define short-term rental as any rental that's less than 30 days for any one period of time. And short-term rentals could accumulate over the course of a year. So someone might have a series of weekend or week-long rentals, but the minute it goes over the 30 days, it's not regulated as a short-term rental. It's a monthly rental, and doesn't come under this jurisdiction of this category. We're trying to create this category to be consistent with Airbnb and VRBO type businesses. And so the substance of what we came up with last Thursday was maybe 30 days or less could be as of right, and an additional 30 or 40 days might be by special permit. And we did not have consensus from the planning board on that issue. This is the kind of thing where I reached out to Joe Roy and Randy Dunfors, and it's a larger topic that deserves a wider airing throughout the town, or at select board meetings, or however we do it. And there's that piece. The second piece is that any short-term rental is required to be registered with the town. There's a fee to register. There's compliance with safety codes and various other things that's in the draft. And if you'd like me to, I do not recall, I apologize, when I might have circulated the draft or who I circulated it to. Perhaps the simplest is to simply update you folks with the most current draft and get your comments. There was a hope or wish, desire that we could get this done and bring it to annual town meeting, but it's just not practical in terms of what's needed and the consensus we need to build before we have a final version. And then also the process where we go to you guys, we say, we've worked on this, we would like you to request us as the planning board to hold a public hearing. There's a formal process as part of the zoning, state zoning requirements for us to then have the hearing. And it takes time to do that too. So here we are at this point in time in March 6th, I guess. It's just not feasible. And so we have had comments, I have had comments from Brian Duval that there's actually more complications with the building code, that a change in use, the use of a house as a short-term rental changes from a single-family dwelling to an R2 occupancy, which is a version of a hotel. It's not really a hotel. And we left it with the planning board last Thursday that I would circulate the draft to Brian as well and get his comments. So I think basically I'm saying, we talked about showing it to Brian and get his comments, showing it to Randy and Bill from the ZBA. Well, I'll just include you folks on that list, and we'll get this moving around a little bit more. So that's the status of that. We understand it's of some urgency because people are doing short-term rentals. Every town has a focus on this. Every town has different opinions about how to do it. There's certainly a lot of controversy. I'm not totally in the loop on how Great Barrington really ended up doing it, but I'm certainly aware that they had a lot of back and forth and different impressions. So let me leave it at that. And I'll just quickly, the accessory dwelling unit is slightly different because we already have an existing provision to provide for an accessory dwelling unit, or it might otherwise be known as an in-law apartment. We wrote this regulation in 1992, board then, and it was intended to allow just what it says, in-law apartments. If someone wants to put a small apartment within their house, they can come to the planning board and get a special permit to do that. And part of the thinking at that time was that it was important that it be limited to not changing the character of a single family residential neighborhood. The thinking has evolved greatly amongst all the towns in Berkshire County, even, much more largely everywhere, that affordable accessory dwelling units are a very good thing to allow people flexibility for their property, to allow more affordable units to exist and be created, to allow people to, the simplest is flexibility to use your property for greater use and greater purposes, and to generate more housing stock for the town. And I'm of the view, and I have two parties I'm aware of who contacted me about the status of this, who want to do an accessory dwelling unit in a detached accessory garage or barn structure or detached structure. And so one of the essential changes that we will recommend is to make allowable to be done in a detached structure. The related aspects of this is that there's discussion that there should be a limitation of distance between a main house and accessory detached structure. Monterey has a code like that I did it for a client once on Stevens Lake, and I remember it as being an 800-foot maximum, but I'm not sure that's right. I looked it up recently and I don't, my memory doesn't serve me well, but there's a limit of distance. There's also typically a limit of size. 800 square feet is the size that comes to mind for Great Barrington and Monterey. And the principle there is that a accessory dwelling is subsidiary to a main house. And of course, that triggers discussion, like if you have a main house that is 20,000 square feet, well, I suppose we only have one of those in town, I'm not sure. Only one that I know of, you know, you'd say, should an accessory house be proportionate to the size of the main house? Well, personally, I don't think so. You know, the idea is it's about the size of an apartment. Maybe it's big enough to be a 2-bedroom unit. Maybe it's 1 bedroom. You know, there's other associated things that we're not really tackling, which is in other jurisdictions, probably in other states where the underlying law is different. There's mechanisms to create tax incentives if someone builds an an accessory dwelling unit that is rent at an affordable rate. There's mechanisms where they might get a tax benefit by keeping their accessory dwelling unit as an affordable dwelling unit. And as my understanding that's evolved is that's not really possible in Massachusetts because there's a law that says something like you're supposed to tax all property at market rates. It's a discussion that might be, we should have a little bit of information on that before we finalize on the regulations, because we might want to include something. My memory slips me. There was some mechanism other than a tax incentive that might help people keep an accessory dwelling unit as an affordable dwelling unit. And you know, that's not necessary to say it needs to be in there. It might be, it's enough to say we already have an existing bylaw that allows an accessory dwelling unit. We just want to broaden it a little bit and make it more flexible for detached structures to become accessory dwelling units. So then the third thing is floodplain regulations. We have an overlay district that regulates construction in floodplains. We've been made aware by regional planning when we did the master plan work that our regulations are outdated because they reference the wrong maps, and they just and we were given a good contact with the state person in the state, I guess FEMA is federal, MEMA is state. Someone who seemed to know all about these regulations. We have some drafts. Andrew Fudge is taking the lead on working with that. We have resolved, but it's a third item that would come to a town meeting for a zone change. The fourth category would be minor corrections and historical inaccuracies. And in some place, our commercial dosing district is called a business district. And it's not a business district, it's a commercial district. There's cleanup of language that could still be done, even though, of course, we did tremendous cleanup. What about 4 years ago now, Marie, on the general code, or kind of when you were early on the team here, right? Give or take. So we got an awful lot done there. But if you ask Joe Roy, he'll say, well, there's still more to do. And I know that one example. I know another example where we define height limit as 2.5 story in the table of the requirements, and we do not define what a half story is. We have glitches and missing items that sort of make up the fourth area where there should be zoning changes made. So that's my quick overview. Can I answer questions on that before I move on to master plan? Or Andy? I mean, I'm not running the meeting, sorry.
No, that's fine.
I have a quick question about, in terms of the accessory dwelling, does that in that definition include the tiny home or tiny house?
I think the tiny house thing is a subset, or potentially a subset of it. Great Barrington addressed theirs by allowing tiny homes in some way. In any of our discussion, we have not explicitly, our draft does not explicitly allow a tiny home. We have a existing provision that allows a mobile home, meaning something on wheels, to be used temporarily during construction of a main house. You get a special permit for that, I believe. And yet, the general sense of the planning board is to not, no one's taken the initiative to want to get into the tiny house thing. So do you think we should allow tiny houses, or do you think we should not allow tiny houses? Do you have an opinion?
My sense is that it's going to come up if we start talking about accessory dwellings. It's enough of a thing that somewhere down the line, somebody's going to say, you know, this is what we want to do. I mean, I've seen enough people banging around it. So I just raised it as an issue. I don't really know if I have a feeling per se.
Our sense is dealing with accessory dwelling units as genuine structures, you know, with normal space requirements. I mean, space requirements that meet building code minimums. There are building code minimums for space requirements, and maximum size. We haven't discussed a minimum size, but minimum size would be given by building code minimums. I think it's our opinion. You know, if someone comes and says, "I'd like to keep my tiny house in my backyard and it's on wheels," that's kind of a different thing from a building. And that's part of our take on this, is that, maybe you need an amendment regulations about mobile homes.
Well, and also, if it's being used as a residence, then that seems to knock it into another part too. And then I had one observation. I believe my understanding was that Great Barrington was there's a proposal on the table for tax relief for people who rent their rentals at lower than market rate. So I don't know if they found a work around that or what the statute or legal things, but I know just from being from the border.
Sure. The concept was suggested to me a few years ago by a housing consultant I've worked with in the past, who I occasionally talk to on an informal basis. And then more recently, something crossed the desk that said that there was potentially a legal limit on that because, you know, state law about assessment rules. I don't know. So I don't really know for sure.
It might be worth our while to like poke into it, or at least watch what they do with it.
I think it's a good thing to do. I would be totally in favor of like adding that to the mix and figuring out a way to do it, because of course that speaks to a general goal of providing more affordable housing in the town. And it speaks to a policy or goal about providing more smaller housing units that are affordable, that are not necessarily like some kind of super deluxe high-end accessory dwelling for a larger super deluxe high-end private. So I'm all for that. I would certainly look into that further now that you bring it up, you know? So why don't I add that to our list of questions to investigate, and I'll do an email, circulate the draft further out to you guys, to Randy, to Joe, Brian Duval, you know, maybe the usual people I know. You see, my process in prior zoning work has been to reach out to a few stakeholders, like including Bob Salerno and, you know, people I've gotten to know a little bit more just from activities. So I don't mean to limit it in any way, but it's kind of like the general process for the planning board has been to develop a consensus point of view from the planning board about what to recommend, and then to build further consensus with a larger circle of stakeholders and people interested, you know, before it goes to public, before it's finalized, and before it goes back to you guys to request you to. It's an awkward sounding process. You know, we send it to you, say, we've worked on this zoning change. Please refer it back to the planning board for a public hearing prior to putting, you know, you have to have a planning board and a planning board public hearing and a recommendation from the planning board in order to put it on the town meeting warrant. So I see ourselves as building more consensus before we get to getting the public hearing. And the public hearing, of course, can give us more comment, but it's still usually in pretty decent shape by the time we get to a public hearing. So, make sense?
Absolutely.
Questions, comments? Okay.
Not for me.
Master plan work. We took the master plan to a deadline of June 2nd, where we had to file a substantially completed draft to the, believe it was called the Community Compact Grant. Forget the exact name of that. Eric Monalis had the lead very much in the relationship on that. We had a contract with regional planning for them to assist. It's really in two parts. It's a master plan and it's an open space and recreation plan. That two parts is a function of some state law that requires an open space and recreation plan to facilitate some aspects of grant funding from state to towns. The person on regional planning that did that was a woman named Lauren Garrett. She was very good. This went through a public outreach process that made the open space and recreation plan, I understand it to be substantially complete and in need of one more real public before it's adopted. Now, as I understand this, the state law says that the planning board adopts these master plans. And it sounds a little narrow, and it's like somewhere there needs to be the larger public outreach so that this is in fact something the town really knows more about and something that the town folks buy into, and something that reflects another cycle of getting opinions from townspeople. So the plan portion wasn't as finished. It had all the chapters, it had all the stuff. The regional planning completed their contract. The planning board as a whole commented in periodic several times. I thought that there was a lot of boilerplate and stuff that didn't relate to West Stockbridge that they produced for us. And I don't want to, I can go into more detail. I don't want to be critical. They provided a service, they did their job. But if you ask Ryan Beatty or Gunnar Goodmanson, what they think of the master plan work, it needed more work. We put a lot of work and time into it in May to re-edit and rewrite some of the chapters. We didn't finish the economic development chapter as fully as I know we wanted to. And there could easily be more work on any of the chapters, but all the chapters were there. It needs a public outreach meeting, and it needs a presentation, it needs discussion and input, and it needs further development and further writing. And so same thing applies to that as what applies to the zoning work. It's like there's only so much energy, time, capacity, etc., from our board to do stuff, and it's taken a back seat to the series of special permits that we've had. So I can't honestly offer leadership on zoning changes because it's more on point with what we've done before, what I've done before. Somehow this plan has to get and fit in. I don't know, and I don't know how that should work. Other than to say, and I speak because I've had, we have awareness of decisions get made or need to be made about things happening in town, and the whole purpose of a master plan is to guide decisions. And so, if I were pushing to finish it, I'd want to hire a different consultant. I don't really want to say I'd want to hire a consultant to really finish it because they probably want to change too much of it, but you need someone who's paid to push it along. And there was some funds left in the grant. I thought we had reserved some funds to be spent that I'm not sure were ever spent. Someone could look into that maybe. I don't know how to, I honestly don't have a plan as to how that could be pulled together. It may benefit by paying someone to take the lead to do it. So that's what I know. That's what I can tell you guys.
I believe if my memory serves, Dana, that there was some money held in reserve,
What it cost, $6,000.
something like that.
Maybe we should check on that. Don't get me wrong. From my point of view, it doesn't seem too far, but the real process is one. Well, we had a steering committee. We got input from certain people. We had the assistance of the gentleman who worked for regional planning. We put time and energy into it in May, and we moved it to where we could get it to. I would ask folks to read the economic development chapter and the housing chapter, and to offer comments and constructive suggestions about how those could be evolved and finished. Bob Solero may have comments about the historical chapter that exists. I'm sure I did send it to the select board in June when it was sent to Community Compact. So hopefully you have those drafts available somewhere. And one of the key things people took away was there was a survey done, public survey, solicit residents' comments. And, one of the takeaways was that there was a high, let me characterize the survey. Regional planning told us that we had a very good percent of results. Like, it was something like 125 people read the survey form, and regional planning thought that was really good compared to other towns or other processes. Some of our board members or somebody else, I can't remember who, said that doesn't sound like very many. So if I go by the opinion of the professional consultant, we had an adequate survey or even a good survey. And one of the things that came out strong was people were thinking there's a need for senior housing. Now, there's other discussion about affordable housing. There's terminology about these things, about affordable housing, workforce housing, and senior housing, affordable housing, and workforce housing categories that have different meanings legally under the state law for supporting those types of housing projects. And my takeaway on the master plan is that, and we also had discussion about different sites or potential sites for affordable workforce or senior housing. And we opened up some opportunities. And part of what has to be finished is to identify graphically potential sites and just have the master plan set some policy for where might there be sites and opportunities for I would say, nonprofit affordable housing development in West Stockbridge of various types, maybe, that that then other processes could pick up on and follow through on. I mean, and that's an area where out of the whole bureaucratic, planner-oriented, verbiage-filled planning document, where I find some energy, that energizes me. If that's kind of, I find something, it energizes me to think, that would be a worthwhile thing to come out of the master plan process, to say, we've got residents saying that we should have some senior housing. There's energy, there's conversation, there's activity and thinking about housing. That's a good result of this master plan process. And the master plan, we do have a master plan. It's just that it was done in 1959 and hasn't been changed or updated since. And so, I actually don't think it's fair to say we don't have a master plan. It's kind of silly, though, of course, to suggest that it's relevant. And, you know, honestly, historically, I've been on the planning board for 30 years. Nobody on the planning board was ever interested in doing planning. And that's a fault of the volunteer nature of it, the lack of expertise. Something, you know, it took a former select board member to the grant money for this and push it through and have some product that positions the town to better obtain grant funding, as I understand these things. I'm an expert on grant funding. So I don't know, that's my snapshot of master plan, where we are, what we've got, what we need to do. You know, happy to have some help getting direction to this thing and getting it done. So
Dana, is there a meeting scheduled?
you know, I mean, I suppose we could. Wouldn't be hard to say, let's get a steering committee together, but
I meant of the current master plan committee.
that's what I mean. Like, sure, I could do that, but you know, I am not the leader of some of this anymore. I can't be. You know, I'm too busy with my work. I'm too old, and I get too tired from all the other regular work we have. I do the best I can, but I can't pick up that charge and lead it to completion. I should. I'm the planning board chair. The planning board's supposed to be the have the lead role on master planning, but you know, if we can, I don't know, hire somebody for the remaining money we have somewhere, that might be a good idea. So
Is there a person that comes to mind?
no, I don't know anyone who does this.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have to search. So, but you know, I mean, honestly, we got to get it together somehow. I mean, it'll be, you know, one of these things like, by the time June 2nd comes around, which isn't too far away, say, well, it's been a year since we worked on it. So, you know, there is a kind of slow pace things take in town sometimes, but you know, we try and guard against that repeating itself too much. You know, at least I hear it. I mean, I don't know.
Might make sense to maybe sound out a neighboring town for a shared service, because Great Barrington, for instance, has 2 town planners, so they might have some capacity.
We should just hire Chris Rumble to do it.
It would be nice, but I'm pretty sure he's busy.
Yeah, I have a, he's busy too. He's like one of these guys who, when you interact with him, he's pretty damn helpful and competent. It's kind of nice, you know.
Yes, he absolutely is. That's why I'm suggesting maybe, you know, approaching Great Barrington in a shared service sort of. I mean, we should be looking at that as much as possible, I think.
Well, that's one way to do it. Sure.
Just a thought.
I appreciate that.
And Chris is a sharp guy.
You know, I mean, I know Chris well enough to call him up and say, hey, we're in a bind. I mean, I can speak for chair where I feel like I'm in a bind because I'm got behind the 8 ball and, you know, we did this and that. And any suggestion, some individual that's a good consultant that could step in and help us finish something up, I can do that. So I will give him a call.
Sounds good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. What else were we supposed to talk about? I forget, Kathleen or Marie.
Well, I mean, I think you've given us your basic update planning and master plan
Okay.
as they coexist.
Yeah.
You might want to, Andy, do you have anything that you wanted to ask of Dana?
No, thank you, Dana.
No, everything's been quite clear, and I feel sorry for Dana, but I hope to God that she's able to hook on to one of the 2 of these guys at Great Barrington. That would help.
I will make a call and we should maybe, you know, when Marie emails me and says, can you come to the select board meeting? It's like, oh, really? Well, I gotta do that too, you know? And I complain slightly, but I'm here. I'm here, trying to be helpful. And so, you know, we have Gunnar Goodmanson not running for re-election on the planning board. I just learned that like a week ago. And he's been quite good. He came to us in the midst of writing the zoning changes for marijuana uses. And, you know, he was a smart guy, engineer by profession. And gosh, he knows how to proofread stuff really well. And I actually do have another topic, you know, just Birch Hill Road subdivision stuff. You know, so we're looking for a replacement who's young, energetic, smart, possibly with some background in planning, and wants to volunteer some time. Now, I don't know who that person is yet. I don't have a particular person I know. So every now and then, Bob Solano seems to come up with the name of someone who's moved to town, maybe has background in planning. I can reach out to him again. I have some names from somewhere, which I can do, actually. I forget her name, but there was someone who was wanting to do a little volunteer work for the board. So anyway, with your permission, the topic of subdivision control regulations and a former subdivision done in 1904, where there are, in theory, some issues that could impact the town or not. So this town has had subdivision control regulations for many years. I believe, if my memory serves me, I saw information that were first adopted in 1959. There are several amendments that were adopted over the course of several different years. Before my time on the planning board, I 1990 more or less. And these always existed in haphazard, badly Xeroxed formats that were in my loose notebook and were also recorded at the Registry of Deeds, because that's what they're required to be do. So if some developer wants to come to town and says, can you give me a copy of your subdivision control regulations? We'd say, in the old days, we'd say, some of the planning board would say, oh, we'll go get it from the Registry of Deeds. But sorry, we don't have a hard copy we can hand you, you know? So under the initiative of Karen Kavanaugh before she moved away, and then she did a great job taking the old documents and updating, coordinating them, indexing them, and getting to the point of looking at references in them that these regulations make a reference to state law, state enabling legislation. And she was trying to go through them and see if the references were up to date to current state law. And so, and that's basically a Word document draft that's, I believe, is substantially complete. And so Gunnar took over the lead on that in proofreading and checking it, and with the assistance of the planning board assistant, which is one of the jobs she can do, they're working together to get a finalized version. Now, what happens with this is that, as I understand the regulations, it's simply the subdivision control law was adopted by the town many years ago. My understanding of this is that it would be something like what we did with the general code in 2019, where we reorganized it, be sure we had old changes incorporated into the document and coordinated and indexed and, you know, organized properly, and then at a time readopted the overall zoning bylaw in this coordinated fashion. The subdivision control regulations are not a town meeting item. It's a technical thing that the planning board votes to adopt. I'm, shall I say, 99% sure that's how the law works. when we get to the point of readopting them and checking them, well, I suppose that's a moment for checking with town council. I think that's right, but I think we would be checking to be sure. So it would be good to have nice, clean, up-to-date subdivision control regulations. And the reason I say that is because in more recent experience, and recent means like 10 or 12 years ago, where the Silvermine Road, forget the road, it's like the one that SK Design was a developer for at the top of Mud Pond. They put in 10 or 12 lots. And, you know, they came with a well-engineered plan. They came with evidence of compliance with all the requirements. They came with minimum requests for waivers from the physical aspects of requirements. I can explain the subdivision law a little bit. I'll circle back to that in a second. And they posted a bond, and the road was completed. It was inspected. Kurt was involved. Kurt liked the work. My former planning board colleagues, particularly Tony Perripin, thought it was a great job. High quality road, you know, done, completed, bond was released, everything was done by the books. And, you know, then a few years later, enough of the residents came together and wanted it to be accepted as a town road. And for the most part, it was a very good road because it had been done well. And Kurt had a few minor comments about crack sealing that needed to be done, but the town meeting voted to accept it as a town road. I don't know, last town meeting or something like that. I don't know whether it was, yeah. And so the customary thing has always been that anytime someone does a subdivision road, it remains as a private road, and the town does not accept subdivision roads as public roads customarily. So there's Samantha Lane was one. There was a guy that did a tiny 3-lot subdivision road off of Pixie Hill Road. You know, I would say Maple, I can't remember them, but it's like a handful, less than 5, you know, and kind of on one hand in terms of subdivision I've been involved in since I've been on the planning board. So we don't get a lot of pressure for subdivision projects, although you never know, we might. And so just as a circling back, I hope I'm not being too long-winded here, but the subdivision control regulation process, it has requirements for construction of a road, 24 feet width, 3-foot shoulders, paved asphalt surface, drainage, sidewalks, sometimes open space regulations, etc. Someone comes and wants to put in a short subdivision road serving a few lots, they can ask for waivers. So you can say, I'm going to build a road off of some gravel road somewhere. I'd rather not be required to put a short piece of asphalt road off a gravel road. You know, there's a kind of practicality of that can be reasonable. And there was a case. So what happened? Like there was a subdivision in 1964 called Berkshire Land Ventures was the developer, and it was a plan for Birch Hill Road and Deer Hill Road. Well, as it evolved, the so-called road was never built to road standards. And I only have some of this piecemeal because an attorney came to the planning board saying, I'd like their covenants and restrictions on the property owners. It ran with the land. The developer, it was, when the developer owned the land, they were responsible for the covenants. The covenant said they were supposed to build a road that met town subdivision control law standards. I have no information about the waivers or anything that was granted. It's lost. I don't know. You know, so basically, the developer never built the road adequately. 20 years later, the planning board took him to court. I know this because Bob Salerno gave me some documents about this. And it was past some statute of limitations, and there was nothing the planning board could do to enforce the regulation. So right now we've got a little section of Birch Hill Road that goes up on the northerly end off of Lennox Road, serves 2 lots with houses that are built, serves a 3rd lot where no house has been built, but that lot gets its frontage from Birch Hill Road. Subdivision control law creates frontage for lots. That's the key thing. The reason you need frontage is because you need fire safety, you need fire truck access to get to a lot, to get to the house on the lot. And so that's why the zoning law requires frontage. And so, you know, then there's a section of Birch Hill Road that's washed out and eroded between this northerly chunk and where Bob Salerno lives. Bob Salerno, if you go up Deer Hill Road and take a left to Bob's house, he's there. You take a right and there's, I don't know, half a dozen other houses up towards the right. Birch Hill Road was supposed to continue on back down to Lennox Road, but there's another section that was washed out and never built or repaired and taken care of. And it's a private road and it's not the town's responsibility. And Kurt has looked at it with the planning board. He's given us opinion. I've talked to town council. He said that and Alex came in, Attorney Glover came in and said, I'd like a release of the covenant for 40 Birch Hill Road because they're the fellows old, ill, they're managing their affairs, you know, or something, want to clean it up. Can I do a release? And her draft of release said, the planning board certifies that the road was built according to all the standards and specifications of the subdivision control law. And it was like, well, we're not going to sign that. I mean, it's like, it wasn't done, you know, and, you know, the request, town council says, you probably have to release the covenant given the passage of time and but you certainly shouldn't have any conditions that the conditions should be written so it explicitly excludes the town from responsibility for the road. So we had consultation with town council, consultation with Kurt. Kurt's going to get the fire chief and the police chief to look at it. We'll get there, but the point of the whole story is like, this is what happens over time with volunteer folks, you know, and less than perfect professional management of all this stuff, you know? And so it's like, I got a crappy built private road called Birch Hill Road that is never built the way it was supposed to have been. You know, like I was in 9th grade when that was built, you know, it's like Kurt wasn't even born. So it's like, this is really ancient, so sort of. So, but it shows the problem of this stuff. It shows like, well, the flip side of the coin is we've got a draft subdivision control regulations, coordinated, collated, indexed, checked, proofread, fresh, clean, readable, almost there. We're getting there. That's part of the reason why it's something we've worked on with the zoning. Well, it also says, well, why haven't we done master plan? Well, we've worked on subdivision control regs. So it's another part of the story to fill you in on. So it's an ongoing topic. It should be finished soon. We think it's going to be a good benefit to the town. And it speaks to these historical issues that were never handled too well. So questions, comments?
I'm good.
You guys are quiet. Anyway, that's just, I just mentioned it because it's current, you know, and it's like relevant to, well, what's going on with the planning board. So. Good for now? Is that what?
Thank you, Dana.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Dana, you might want to stay on because next on our agenda, which I need to call up, is to talk about affordable housing trust, and being that that is something that's been talked about in master plan. I thought you might want to
stick around, listen.
stick around. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So I think that this Andy Potter suggested that we look into the idea of establishing an affordable housing trust. I believe it was town council who pointed us toward Article 41, which I think we all got copies of. I have not had a whole lot of time to look at this. We got it on at some point on Friday. I didn't have time on Friday or over the weekend. I don't know, Andy, you brought it up. Do you want to give us a little bit of background?
Yeah, I kind of thought I would. Yeah, basically the statute around affordable housing trusts, and there is one that exists in, well, actually, there's probably about, I think, around 109 communities around the state that have affordable housing trusts, about 98 under the particular Chapter 44, Section 55C. And affordable housing trust has a number of purposes, but its main purpose is to provide sort of an agile, provide communities with a way to utilize funds that either grant funds from the state, grant funds from the feds, ARPA money is an example. And in particular, where this originally came from, at least the current state of the law, was as because there was an increased availability of local funding sources like the Community Preservation Act. The Community Preservation Act has a requirement for, I think, 10% of its annual outlay, and matching funds from the state have to be directed towards housing. And basically, that is one of the primary source of funding that the Affordable Housing Trust in Great Barrington uses. But it also is a place where ARPA money earmarked for housing can be appropriated. It's a place for, if the town holds real property that potentially could be either developed or used for a range of housing purposes, then it can hold real property. So it's basically a vehicle that a town can use to leverage all the various aspects of that are available in terms of housing, and do it fairly quickly. Because once it's appropriated to the trust fund, it's part of the trust fund. Trust fund is it's a Massachusetts municipal body, ruled under all state meeting laws and whatnot. And you can see in the packet, and those of you that are watching at home, you can go and download our packet from the town website. The warrant is sitting there. But it can provide examples. It can provide financial support for the construction of affordable homes by private developers, nonprofit or for-profit, rehabilitate existing homes to convert to affordable housing, increase affordability in new housing developments, surplus municipal land or buildings, as I said before, support rent insurance for low and moderate income households. And some of the example, I know that Great Barrington works very closely with Construct. They provide a lot of the administrative support for the trust fund. So the trust fund has funds. They in turn contract with Construct to provide things like rental vouchers for low and moderate income households in Great Barrington. So there are a whole range of potential that is sitting there, and I know we've had a number of conversations over certainly the last year that I've been part of the select board around housing. A lot of it felt like talking the talk, and I'm really excited that we might have an opportunity here to step up and walk the walk when it comes to affordable housing. And that, we don't have a housing authority. We have Randy's had to step up as a housing expert for the CPC. This would give us a way to really leverage the CPC money. Admittedly, a town our size, it's not huge. We'd probably be looking at other grant opportunities. And of course, we have the seed money in ARPA. But all of that, I think that potentially we could have a vehicle that we could really work on some of the really worthy ideas that I've heard in a number of forums since I became more directly involved with the town.
So I have a question. I just haven't really had a chance to dig into this that much, but if you establish an affordable housing trust, you have a board of trustees. Is there any sort of requirement to have a housing authority? Do those things go hand in hand? Or is
I
a
don't-
housing trust with its own board of trustees just an independent entity within the town?
It would be an independent entity, yeah. That's my impression. So the composition of the Board of Trustees is one ex officio non-voting member, 5 voting members. Town administrator serves as the ex officio. The voting members include a member of the select board chosen by the select board and 4 members appointed by the select board, all of whom would need to be residents. 2-year term. And then, one of the first steps is to file a declaration of trust with the Office of Deeds that would allow, that declaration of trust, would need to be recorded in the Registry of Deeds and filed with the Berkshire County Registry of the Land Court, which allows all of the potential to really open up there.
Kathleen, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Andy, is there any downside to this at all? If there is, what might it be?
To be frank, I can't see any. It is again, it's a vehicle that allows us to pool our resources and be able to react to situations a little faster than what we're able to do. And it was created specifically by the state to allow communities to leverage the CPA money. All of a sudden we had CPA. All of a sudden we had a legal requirement that 10% of the expenditure of the CPA or the CPC in any given year had to be spent on housing. And you had all these communities that really didn't have a mechanism for realizing, like, for instance, no, we don't have a housing authority. Great Barrington does have a housing authority, but it's separate from the trust fund.
Doesn't it also mean that if we don't establish something like this, meeting that 10% watermark, that somebody, an independent, could come in and build affordable housing to meet that? Am I saying that right?
Well, I don't think the 10% from CPC is going to be a really significant, at least in our town. I have a feeling that's a fairly small little chunk of money.
Right.
The trust fund potentially could develop more resources, both in terms of real property and funding, like, for instance, the ARPA seed money, and build up over time so that we potentially could have a for-profit or a not-for-profit come in and want to develop property.
Okay.
In a way that, and the beauty is, again, it does go hand in hand with the master plan. Any discussion of housing in the master plan, all of a sudden you have a board appointed by the select board, it's a town board, looking at and marshaling resources to actually make things happen.
Thanks. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's I think it's actually, it is very timely because this has been something that's been of much discussion for a good long time with even in the beginning, very beginning days of the formation of the master plan committee. It was one of the potential objectives. So it feels timely to me.
I
And
saw Dana waving her hand there a moment ago. You're gonna have to unmute, yeah.
Right. I have the loosest of knowledge that Stockbridge has a housing authority. And I don't, many other towns in Berkshire County have a housing authority. Do we know? Does anybody know?
Great Barrington, Stockbridge, I believe Lennox does. Williamstown does.
Yeah.
Um,
Because
we wouldn't be alone.
I've been involved in limited affordable housing projects as architect, and my experience in Great Barrington at the Hillside Housing Project was, which is behind the courthouse, was Construct acquired the property from the town. The town made it available, or not didn't make it available, but put out a request for proposal for nonprofit housing developers. This was 15 years ago by now. I hope my memory's right. But one version of a process is the town identifies land. It might be town-owned land. If the town can put out an RFP for a non-housing developer. So in that case, Construct was the developer, owns the land now, manages the property as rental units, and hired the CDC of South Berkshire as the managing agent or developer of the construction part of the project. So there's a model there that, I keep in different forums and contexts, and that's a limited knowledge I have of this kind of thing. It strikes me as just glancing at the state law, which I've never looked at before, but as you're talking, I was sort of skimming it, and the trust is much more of a legal entity with authority and rights to basically own the land and develop the property. Is that your understanding, Andy?
Yeah, that is one option. There's a lot of ways it can go. It can contract with external, like for instance, what they did with Construct.
Correct. Yeah.
That type of thing. I mean, like for instance, the rental assistance program that the trust fund in Great Barrington has, that's completely managed by Construct. They so that they don't have an employee. The trust fund doesn't have an employee doing this work. It's a matter of identifying various stakeholders within that. I guess for lack of a better term, the affordable housing community.
Do these trust funds employ administrators sometimes? Never.
They have the authority and they have the power to do it. Yes.
Uh-huh.
We can all do it. I don't think so. I mean, I can tell you, like for instance, I was looking at this template that we're looking at here for Article 41. The town council pulled that from Worcester, and I was looking at. So I went over to look at Worcester, and yeah, Worcester has a manager. I mean, you can imagine the amount of money that they're managing in an affordable housing trust fund in a town like Worcester. Now, our scope and scale would obviously be far less than a large community like Worcester.
If I can extrapolate from, a master plan process without a town planner or a half-time town planner or somebody whose employment, this job description is to manage a planning process, I can imagine the need for a professional to run a housing trust, or, I don't know. It's just kind of like, I also have a loosest external peripheral perception of, the highway department, I think, is so well run by Kurt, of course, but it keeps surfacing that there's some, stormwater management activity, and someone is doing a meeting, someone's doing a report. There's so much flow of stuff that, as a planning board, we think, oh, can we keep up with it? Well, we can't. I don't know. It's kind of like, speaks to a larger need for, you know, I don't know if it's a town planner or not, but somebody that might, town planner could be a housing authority director too, maybe. I don't know. But I have no idea how that, it's just.
So Bob Salerno has his hand up. If Dana didn't meet, were you finished?
I'm finished. I'll mute myself now.
Yeah, Dana, also, I think Lee and Lennox, Andy, did you look at those?
I knew Lennox has one. I didn't realize Lee did.
Yeah, and I don't think they have employees either, but the only downside, and it's not a downside, it's just a requirement, is, we're small in getting the 5 or 4 people. And maybe the answer is, hiring a part-time planner and housing trust. But I read this actually a couple times now, and it looks like a good shell, a good structure to move forward with this. From my point of view, do you know if this is set up as an enterprise fund or is it a completely separate financial thing, Andy?
I think it's a completely separate financial thing.
So it's
Trust fund itself is.
but it did say it was managed by our town accountant and our town treasurer.
Yeah, I suspect they. Yeah. I
So
think
it would still have the financial controls in place and
Yeah.
which is good. So, no, from my smell, it looks like a good thing. It looks like a good step forward. So anyway, that's my 2 cents. I'll lower my hand. You can mute me, Marie.
So would a good next step be maybe to for us all to study this a little bit more, talk to people. We do have some people who, we've all been working on this issue on the master plan committee. There are some stakeholders kind of already there. We could reach out to people to see who might have interest in serving on the Board of Trustees.
Well, what's the which meeting do we sit down and review the warrants?
So the meeting of the 23rd, your next meeting, I need you to approve the warrant because I have to have it. I have to have it printed and everything and put in the town report. So the next meeting, so you have the next, 2.5 weeks?
2.5 weeks.
Because it's not till the 23rd, so.
How much before the meeting do you need for us to say go with the warrant?
Well, I have it in the warrant and I will give it to you as soon as town council is done reviewing it. So you'll
Okay.
have it way before the meeting to go over it all. And then I just have you approve it at your meeting on the 23rd.
Okay.
My concern about slow rolling it is what the discussion that came up around the ARPA money and the trigger point around getting the ARPA money appropriated for housing. This is as Bob called it, a shell that would allow us to appropriate ARPA money. That would satisfy, I'm pretty darn sure, we can ask town council, of course, but that would satisfy the federal government that we had appropriated money for housing. And so that would release that requirement and we could start growing it from there.
Kathleen, can I'm gonna unmute Bob, is that okay?
Yeah, at the meeting of the 23rd would be perfect timing because we'll have the FinCom there. I don't know if we have to give an opinion on this or not.
No, it's just.
We're not spending money and it's not, it's not budget related.
No,
It seems to be select board.
Yeah, it's just the
But-
board wanting it on the warrant, that's all.
But if you guys don't mind, I would like the FinCom guys to get behind it as well. Again, increasing or what did you use? Bringing the constituents on board,
Stakeholders, absolutely.
stakeholders.
so.
And so, Andy, when we're there, if you could give the same speech.
Happy to. I could even do a little slide deck.
Well, I don't think you have to, we don't have enough time for that. You can leave the video done and the TikTok out, but
Okay.
Dana has something.
My past experience with the Hillside Affordable Housing Project, Tim Gallo was the former director of the CDC of South Berkshire. I worked with him on that project. I'd worked him previously on a East Street apartment project that Construct did. I've known him over the years a little bit. I've been in touch in the master plan process to talk about housing and so forth. When I had various early unofficial sketches and ideas about different housing ideas, don't even want to say the name of the street because it passed by, you know, like, but the premise that the key premise he presented to me that may be relevant is that the state agencies that look to do funding for affordable housing, EHCD, and there's just so much in a process I don't know. There's a website they have. You make the application for funds. You need to be an expert to do it. But he said, if you want to try and do an affordable housing project in West Stockbridge of some kind, maybe it's workforce housing, maybe it's senior housing. I don't want to put a label to it too strongly, but having the town able to participate in some way can be very important to the state agencies. In other words, if it was town-owned land that could be donated to the project, and that's the town's participation. If it were ARPA funds, it could be, you know, part of some funding, albeit probably a small part, that would probably be advantageous. If it's just community development funds that function as seed money for professional service to develop a project, that can be good too. I did volunteer work for Tim on the affordable housing site. Then I got hired for about $10,000 to do a plan, and that money came from some agency that loaned CDC the money to pay me, and they got paid back when they got their permanent financing. And so, again, I had a little tiny glimpse of way back when of how that worked. But the idea that there could be a legal entity with appropriated town's fund dedicated to housing would be, I have a sense that would be a real leg up towards moving West Stockbridge to the ability to talk to professionals in this domain, you know, Construct, CDCs, Berkshire Housing, and so forth. And there's others too, but those are the three that come to mind. So anyway, that's my additional 2 cents worth, if that's helpful. I think it's a good idea.
So does everyone agree that it would be good to start to talk to some stakeholders and find who might be interested in serving on the Board of Trustees? We could submit names to Marie in the meanwhile.
Sure.
You can speak. Go off. Dana wants to go off mute, Marie.
I can.
Oh,
I'm used
she
to
can-
running the meeting. Sorry, you know, like I'm just like whatever. It's like, do you have to have a Board of Trustees ready to go when you vote at town meeting to create this thing?
No.
So it's a little wiggle room to time, maybe.
Yeah, but I think we certainly could start putting out feelers.
Want to get support to it.
Mhm.
I just
Right.
would like to make sure that it's part of the package we vote on or discuss on the 23rd.
Say it again, Andy.
I said, I just want to make sure that Article 41 is part of the package that we discussed for the town warrant on the 31st.
Yeah, I'm gonna have it, I already put it in there, and that'll be the warrant, part of the warrant, and if you decide to vote to take it out, it's just simple to take it out, but I'll have it in there.
Yeah, good. Okay, unless anyone has anything else to mention about affordable housing, we can move on to select board speak. Andy Kraus?
Yes, we spent a lot of time this evening on a lot of subjects, and I can table this if you want me to in reference to broadband and the internet and what meeting I attended last week. Again, I can summarize it. I don't have any great details because they are still working on it. The Municipal Digital Equity Planning and the Broadband Regional Planning Commission. I have some good news and other news in the fact that we are not the only town that is suffering from these, I'll say, inequities. There were 11 towns there, including us, that were at this meeting. It was a Zoom meeting out of Pittsfield. It was Clarksburg, Pittsfield, Great Barrington, Williamstown, Lenox, Lee, Sheffield, Adams, us, and Windsor. And everybody was complaining about the same thing that we've heard, and justifiably so: improve service, negotiate costs, and add on possibly a consultant. So I am in the midst, with Marie's help, of calling this Wiley Goodman, who sounds like she's the chairperson out of Pittsfield that's spearheading this. There are a lot of phases to it, not making excuses. I want to find out what our next step is. Our name is in the hat, so we're in there. There is grant money, there's consultants that are offered, and where we go from here. There's grant versus loan, and I want to find that out. And again, the person that's spearheading this is Wiley Goodman. There is, and I'll just throw this out, and then we can end up the meeting, whatever you want to do. It's called a one-touch rule, where Verizon, Spectrum, Eversource, Charter have an attachment to, and I'll use an object, a pole, that they all can attach themselves to and utilize that pole. The however is that there is a grandiose cost to that pole or poles in each town. And they have you kind of like at bay with this money situation. It's almost like a legitimate holdup, because the three of them, although it's one pole, you might say, aha, it's going to save us some money. Aha, but what is the cost to that? And aha is the missing part. So there are pieces that are missing. However is that they know that this situation exists. They're trying to work on it expeditiously, but again, some of the towns are running into the same problem that we are, like Lenox, Lee, Sheffield, that you can't do it on your own. You've got to do it on an aggregate basis because there's more power. So when I have an update, I'll hopefully have some more updated specific information for our next board meeting. However, if I get anything sooner that's more prevalent, I'll let everybody know at that time.
So Andy, wherein does the problem lie in West Stockbridge? Like, do we know, have people, do we know who does, who doesn't have internet? And I'm just wondering, I mentioned, there was I think in one of the not so long ago town reports, maybe it was when Bernie was the chair, he wrote that the town was 100% covered. And I just wondered where the disconnect lies, because I think it's been worked on for so long, and I had believed that there was a solution. So is it, who doesn't have broadband or internet? And do we,
Well, this is my understanding, that some of the businesses have the internet and connection. However, and if I'm misquoting, stop me. According to sources, including Andy Potter and other people, that the service, even though we might have it, is really bad, and it doesn't help to bring in other people that want to come in and set up or establish businesses. So it's relative. Forgive me for saying it. You can get into a Volkswagen, and the Volkswagen will get you from New York to California. but you can get in a high-speed car that'll drive quicker and it'll save you a day. They're both accomplishing the same feat of getting you from point A to point B, but one's a little bit quicker and one's a little bit faster and one is a little bit more modern. And the frustration from what I heard of this conference, which was about an hour and a half, was every town was running into the same roadblock. One town, Sheffield, established a go-to person to try to get and negotiate. Now, they have these quote unquote maps of what is happening in these areas. However, the maps aren't for public consumption, and that too is frustrating. So this consortium of the Municipal Digital Equity Planning Board, from what I could see, is very, very strong. There was a fellow from the USDA, Robert, and I didn't get his name, but he came in and he's located in the north and northeast, where he goes all over the northeast, Buffalo, Maryland, Jersey, and there are funds available. But we don't know, and you guys can correct me we don't know enough of the integral parts to go into this problem. We know that, and Andy, I don't want to misquote you, but Andy sitting there somewhat frustrated, you got to get me quicker service. And there are other people out there, you got to get me quicker service. Now they might have service. Now other towns, not that it's going to make us do any good or feel any better, but there are other towns that do have some quicker service. But the underlying question and concern was improve the dam service, negotiate the costs, and bring in a consultant so that we don't have to waste our time or energy or days, setting up meeting and pondering over this. So again, I'm going to hit up Wiley Goodman. Now there might be another person that has to be involved with our special needs. But Marie has filed this application. The application is with them so that if anything comes about, we're on the list and we're in the pot. And that's as much as I've gathered and can, give you guys at this particular point in time. And I don't think of for lack of laziness, but I don't think that they have anything further update other than what's the next step, what we can do next ourselves. But I think it's got to be done in an aggregate basis and not just West Stockbridge alone. We don't have enough residents and hits to say, okay, fine, this is what we want. I think Great Barrington and maybe Lenox and Williamstown have a larger population, but they too, and I hate to sound like a broken record, they too are running into the same frustrations. So I don't know whether that answered it for you, but that's what I got from the meeting.
We also have an agreement that we signed with Spectrum. So, we're contractually linked to Spectrum at this point. But it was the missed opportunity of the last mile fiber rollout. I go to, I've been, every once in a while, I pop my head at Zillow to take a look at prices, houses around county, and I see listings in places like Monterey where they did hook up to fiber, and that's one of the prime prime item on their listing is the house is served by fiber optic internet. I pay a premium. I pay extra to get the best package I can get from Spectrum because my life revolves around my bandwidth. Now, I know Frank Landsberger was, he was more probably the loudest squeaky wheel that we've had. And I guess he gets, I think he has some distance issues and he's just not happy with the service. It comes down to, Bob has some good stories about this. I know that.
Sorry. Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah, you're right, Andy. It was an incredibly missed opportunity. I lived through the Wired West wars, and
infuriating.
we rolled over and played dead. But the issue the issue is speed and price, and it gets worse when you get out to the West Center area. I know there's speeds, they don't even have the option of the high speed, especially, and when we are up on the hill too. So I'm glad I'm not a video editor because I would be shooting myself, or doing archives. I mean, it takes too long.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fortunate. I live like 150, 200 feet up from the Great Barrington border. And actually, when we first moved into this house, we had Time Warner. Time Warner had the contract for Great Barrington. We have, I mean, I have Great Barrington sewer. I used to have a Great Barrington landline, and we had Time Warner. And then at some point, my wife and I decided we didn't need cable anymore. We got rid of it. And then when I tried to get back in, I was stuck with the West Stockbridge Spectrum contract.
Well, the other issue is the poles. I believe when we were looking at it with Wired West, Verizon owned all the poles. And it was, I won't use a crude term, but it was not a pleasant experience.
It was a missed opportunity.
Big time. They were also supposed to wire every house to the house, including the lines in West Center, which was never enforced. So some of those long driveways like Frank's and
Marty List, I guess.
Yeah, Marty. I mean, these guys had to pay for it themselves. It was, anyway.
And it's expensive.
Yeah.
That's like $10,000, $20,000.
Anyway, I'll shut up.
Okay. Any updates from Andy Potter?
No, I'm gonna try to save my voice because I'm still recovering. COVID ate my homework.
You are feeling better though.
Getting a day, every day I get a little bit better. I'm back to an 8-hour day.
Marie, any updates from you?
No, just, I just want to say I'm working on, our Council on Aging driver is out. She's not working for us anymore because she's having health issues. And Richmond, who we work with their Council on Aging, also is having issues finding drivers. So I am meeting with Richmond this week, and I'm actually meeting with Great Barrington tomorrow morning because I called Stockbridge, and Stockbridge uses, Great Barrington has full-time hired drivers. And so Stockbridge has hooked on with them for that. So I'm meeting with Mark tomorrow morning, and I'm going to talk to him about that. And then I'm also going to be talking to Richmond on Wednesday, see what we can do about it. So if anybody complains about it or mentions it, I am working on it.
Okay. All right, good. One last thing, Andy Potter, just check your email. We need to come up with a date, hopefully this week, to go into executive session to talk about contracts.
I'll throw you some tomorrow.
Okay. All right, so if that's it, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A second.
Roll call vote. Andy Kraus.
Aye.
Andy Potter.
Aye.
And I am an aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.
Take care.